Toyota, one of the biggest car manufacturers in the world. It's a global hub for innovation and a crown brand in the world of hybridization. This is a brand that has given us affordable sedans, legendary SUVs, indestructible pickup trucks, and supercars that make us go weak in the knees. So why is it that when it comes to India, we only seem to be getting a fraction of the brand's capabilities? Why is it that a brand that's been in India for the better part of 2 decades is still relying on the goodwill of primarily 2 models, the Innova and the Fortuner? And now, why is it that their launch strategy involves mildly reworked versions of cars made by Maruti Suzuki? Let's take a look with a ZigTalk. Partnerships between brands is nothing new. With emission norms, safety norms, and technological demands going up, developmental costs are going up with them. So in this scenario, it just makes sense to outsource aspects of car making that someone else is better at. It's why we have cross-batch cars, it's why we have platform sharing, and it's also why we'll often see brands outsourcing major components like engines and transmissions to brands outside. It's just quicker, easier, and more cost-effective to do it this way. This is the aim of the Toyota and Suzuki partnership, which has implications not only in India but across the world. Toyota has a strong background in hybridization. Maruti Suzuki has a good idea about making vehicles for markets like India, and these are just some of the benefits. It's a way to benefit from each other's competencies. But for many, it seems like Toyota is taking the easy way out, and we're missing out on the potential that their global range has to offer. While we aren't going to justify this move, it could be useful to set some perspective as to why this is happening. As with any brand, Toyota is looking to get more customers into their showrooms. And strong sellers as the Innova and Fortuner are, a lot of these buyers are repeat customers, and they do more for the brand's goodwill than any brand ambassador ever could. Simultaneously, Toyota wants to get a wider range of customers stepping into their showrooms, and the place where the footfall will be at its greatest is in affordable segments. This is where the urban cruiser and Glanza come into the picture. Now, these are 2 models that have often been trolled online, but the plan worked. Let's take the Glanza for example. It adds about 2,000 to 3,000 monthly sales for Toyota on average, and a very large portion of them are first-time Toyota buyers. Yes, it's a scratch compared to what the Baleno sells in a similar time period, but it's still thousands of customers that Toyota otherwise simply would not have. This isn't just good for the main company, but also the dealers who now stand to make more service revenue. This is the same perspective that Suzuki has. For example, the Corolla and RAV4 already have badge-engineered alternatives by Suzuki in the form of the Suzuki Sways and the Suzuki A-Cross in Europe. A Corolla rebadge was also supposed to be on the cards for India, but for now, no details about that are out so far. Now, why did buyers choose the Glanza over the Baleno or the urban cruiser over the Vitara Brezza? Well, in some instances, it is a case of them getting a better price and warranty package from Toyota, but one of the major reasons is also the opportunity to own something rarer. Relatively. You will see more of the original Maruti products than the rebadged Toyotas, which also makes the latter a little bit more exclusive. Brand also has a very big role to play over here because it might sound superficial, but it's for those conversations in the conference room where you say, I drive a Toyota instead of saying, I drive a Maruti Suzuki. Toyota has tried to go its own way in segments where it did not have any presence earlier. The Etios, Etios Leva, and Etios Cross are examples of this, but they all ran into unique challenges of their own. For one, the cars did get off to a good start, but then owners didn't really like the quality, especially on the inside. It didn't feel Toyota enough, and its feature and design package didn't really appeal much to younger buyers either. And eventually, its popularity in the taxi market did a lot to drive away private car owners. Now, Toyota had even launched the Etios Platinum in a bid to get private car owners back into the equation, but once you've been labeled a taxi market car, it's very hard to let go of that kind of title. The entire Etios range involved a heavy investment on Toyota's part, but the models never got the success that Toyota was hoping for. We've seen something similar happen with the Yaris, wherein it got off on the wrong foot from day one and could never really correct course ever since. This seems to have made Toyota want to play it safer and go with cars that already have a good sales reputation because they have a resume to show that buyers are already interested in them. Less than ideal previous experiences could have also made Toyota risk averse. What doesn't help matters is how the Indian market has thrown some curveballs along the way. For example, even before the pandemic, there were some odd events like the registration ban on diesel engines displacing over 2000cc in Delhi NCR, which left a sour taste in many manufacturers' mouth. And Toyota was one of them, especially because they had only just invested about 1100 crore in a brand new diesel engine factory. And there have been a lot of discussions that don't exactly paint the best policy picture for India, whether it's the government suddenly realizing that mild hybrids aren't actually hybrids, or temporarily mandatory insurance policies, or a plan to go 100% electric with the Indian car market by 2030 with no real feasible plan to make that happen smoothly. Policy changes are often unpredictable, and it makes many manufacturers wary of long-term investments without a guarantee that the policy roadmap is going to be predictable and steady. The buck stops with Toyota Kirloskar is what a lot of us assume. But for any brand new launch or new product, there's a lot of work that has to be put in terms of research and development, and a lot of approvals that have to come in from Toyota HQ. So even if you, as the home brand, see the potential for a brand new launch, there's a lot of work that you need to do before you can send in that proposal for an approval. That includes measurable studies of trends, proof of numbers on the ground, and strong enough referencing versus competitors. It's difficult to be very flexible when you're a company as big as Toyota. And if you, as the Indian arm, have presented a business case, you need to be sure that it's future-proof, because it's going to be a while before it reaches the execution phase, and if the things don't work out, it's your neck on the line. Badge engineering may not get you the best possible results, but it is a cost-effective way of driving your sales up. To reiterate, we aren't going to justify Toyota's moves, just trying to break down the reasons as to why this is happening. While it is a more efficient way to get more products and sales into your range, we do hope that Toyota gives us a better taste of what its international range has to offer beyond expensive imports. And the sooner they do this, the better.